Hey everyone, it's Kat and I am back today with a very exciting start of a review. This is going to be a multi-look review, like an extensive, full-on, what do I think about this palette, all the looks I've created, swatches, all that good stuff of a brand new Glaminatrix palette. So this is the Rich Romantic Palette. So this is the box. It gives you a sort of an idea of what the palette looks like. There's some nice soft purpley hues. There's some nice holographic design. This is the actual palette. So it's this almost like a slightly metallic leather, faux leather effect. The text is actually holographic as well. So you get a sort of vibe. It's like soft romantic, but with a twist of like fun. And I'm excited to try this palette. Let's reveal it before I give any information because you want to see it. So this is their newest palette. It's got beautiful tones. There's some sort of more red tones, what I would consider more sort of peachy vibe, purpley vibes. And then this is what I think of, like if you think of like a rose, this is like the stem and the leaves. These are actually, they're browns, but this one has a bit of green to it. So it's very, very pretty. It's their 15 pan format in the smaller size. We'll talk about that soon. So this is sort of like the second nudish palette from the Glaminatrix team. And this one definitely has more of that romantic, floral, very pretty sort of vibe to it. So this palette hasn't launched yet. It's out on the 8th of October at 8 AM Australian Eastern Standard Time. So I might have some time conversions in the description box with more detail if you want to know the specifics. I don't know everything right at this point in time, like the price, but I'm going to assume that the price is very similar or the same as the Sugar and Spice palette, which was their last palette that was launched. Now, this is the same size as the Sugar and Spice, so it's their smaller pan palette. In comparison, the Nearly Natural, which is this one here, you can see that's the same sort of color theme, but you can see the Nearly Natural is a lot bigger. The pan size is bigger. So that's the new pan size versus the old pan size. And you can see that this complements the Nearly Natural really well. So I love this palette. It's like one of my favorite of all time. But this does complement the tones really nicely. It adds a little bit more vibrance to the purples. You delve into like a burgundy, you have a brighter sort of peachy shade, and then you also have these shades which just look like shimmers for now, but they are actually either duochrome or multichrome. So whereas this palette is mainly metallic sparkly shades and mattes, this one does have different finishes and different sort of vibes. So when I'm looking at this on the side, you're seeing what looks like sort of peaches and nudes and maybe a bit mauvey. This one looks green. This one looks like a vibrant bluey purple. And these sort of look, that looks gold, that looks green. So they do have different sort of shifts to them. So even though this is a fairly safe in terms of color story, you do get some nice, interesting textures going on, which I love. So that's the comparison. All of their palettes are depottable. So if you have a little magnet, for example, this one's just from Inglot, you could actually pop out a shade. I haven't swatched this or taken any photos yet, so I'm gonna demonstrate on this one. You can actually depot the shade. So if you have a magnet, it just takes that out and it's got the shade name on the back. So that says Taffy, for example. So if you want to mix and match with your Sugar and Spice, for example, it is the same size as this palette. So you can definitely do that. So obviously I'll set this in PR because it hasn't launched yet, but I do have a discount code with them as well. So if you want to get 10% off your order, use the code CAT, but I will have hopefully release information all in the description box if you want links and you want more information. So let's get on to swatches, and then I will demonstrate this on my eyes and we'll check back in over the next week or so, hopefully with a good handful of looks using all shades, and then I'll conclude what I think about the palette overall. All right, time for swatches, and I'm going to start with the shade Admire, which is the first one there. It's a very pretty sort of rosy matte. Beautiful. Oh, beautiful. The next shade is Romantic, which is this beautiful sort of like iridescent. It looks like it's catching very orange on camera. In my angle, it looks more yellow, sort of champagne, but it is also like an iridescent white. So it's definitely a multi-chrome sheer sort of iridescent shade, which I really like. Then there's the shade Intoxicating, which is essentially the packaging color. So it's like a soft, dusty, light mauvey pink. And you can see it here. So it's pretty much what the packaging, I think, was inspired by, or vice versa. Whoa, that looks like a mirror. It's crazy. This is the shade Captivating. So this is a bit more sparkly. It's a little bit more pink. But again, that is such a stunning shade. People are going to go nuts for that shade. It is metallic as heck. I can sort of see pink elements, sort of slightly more champagne elements. It is just gorgeous. That is such a gorgeous shade. Oh my God, I'm dying for it. Timeless is, I should have actually done these in the rows, like going down, because the color stories sort of look like they should go in columns. This is a really interesting, do I call it a coffee? Like a burnt caramel brown. I really like it. This middle row is very fun. So this middle row has all the special sort of shades. Charming. Again, I see sort of like a fiery orange here, but it also has a bit of green and a bit of yellow. I'll have to show you in a different angle. It's very pretty. Seductive is more of a green to yellow to maybe blue situation. Whoa, it looks very yellow on camera. I can see it as being like a grass green. Gorgeous. This one, again, it's going to be a fan favorite. This is called Rich. It has this beautiful, I can see it as being green. Looks very green, blue, purple. It's like I've got a purple base, and then in some elements, like where you're looking at the moment, it looks pink and, I don't know, sparkly champagne. To me, it looks purple and blue. It is, and green. It is crazy. All right, Magnetic. Wow. Wow, whoa, on camera, that's purple and green. In my angle, it looks, I don't even know, not silvery, almost purpley gray, I don't know, greeny gray. That's intense. Then Allure, this looks more of a traditional shimmer. It's like an dark olive green, a mossy green. I think it's really beautiful. I love greens and pinks together. I think they're very, very nice. Bottom row is the matte row. I love this. This is the shade Lover. It's this dark sort of burgundy. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Okay, that was out of focus, but you can see it's velvety. It's so beautiful. This one is Devotion. It's more of a brighter, fun sort of coral color. Very, very nice, bright pop. So it will like brighten any of these shimmers that you might be pairing it with. Cherish is sort of the first purple. This doesn't swatch the best, but I feel like it's going to build up really, really nicely. Last two shades, we've got Intimate, which is a darker purple. Again, it looks very velvety. And Passion, which is a dark sort of chocolate brown. So there we go. That is quite the spread. I think just on first impressions, what really stands out to me as being excellent about this palette is the play with textures. So not only is this quite a wearable palette, but you have some really fun textures in here that will elevate and make this color story that I guess we've seen before. It's like a rosy sort of color story. It's going to elevate it to different heights. So I love that. There's some grungy elements, so you can still go a bit grungy, which I dig. There's some really nice soft elements that you can use on a daily basis, no problem. You can get your really basic work looks out of this, but then you can go really rich and vibrant here and make something really intense, or use these as liners, and there's a bit of brightness. This is quite bright. This is going to add a bit of brightness. So I think this is a really well balanced palette. I love the split of mattes and shimmers. I think this is insanely beautiful, and I'm going to show it to you in different angles so you can see the different multi-chrome effects. Look at that. Wow. I love this. Wow. All right. With the mirror there, hopefully you can see that these do have different tones to them. So that one that looks quite purple front on looks quite like silvery green on the side. The one that looks light pinky champagne has that blue shift. The one next to it that looks sort of, I don't know, orangey maybe, has a green shift. And the one that's more vibrant, peachy orange, has more of that yellow shift to it. So there's a lot of sort of fun things happening here. All right, demo time. I'm using my Natasha Denona eyeshadow base, so I'm just going to pop that on. All right, I'm going to start with the shade Intoxicating. I do want to say I've just picked it up on a brush and it is a little bit dustier than I sort of expect from Glaminatrix. It's not a problem. I don't mind a dustier formula, but just don't go like working too hard in the pan because it does pick up very easily and can disrupt the pan a little bit. But this is a lighter, slightly chalkier shade, so maybe it's just this particular shade. But this is a really nice sort of setting, prepping shade for me. It's probably a little bit light for a lot of people, but I feel like it's a really nice sort of, it'll help brighten other things that you put over the top. I really want to use the shade Captivating. That one, that's like my main thing, but I want to put it over the top of something because I want to see the difference between it layered over a primed base and also on like a darker sort of shade. So I'm going to actually go in with the shade Admire, which is the first shade. I'm sort of drawn to the top row at the moment. I don't know why, but I don't usually like pinks. This is actually a really pretty pink because I can see it being like working really nicely with warmer tones, cooler tones. So I'm thinking purples, oranges, browns, reds. A lot of shades could work really nicely with this pink, and also it blends really nicely. Like it applies really easily, blends really nicely. So if you want a little bit of color, but something that's not too scary, this sort of pink is really, really gorgeous. I was almost tempted to go into Devotion and mix that with the pink because I think it's gorgeous, but I sort of want to keep Devotion for that one. I feel like those two shades are going to pair really beautifully together, and I really want to use this one. Just going to run the pink on my lower lash line a little bit. I might actually mix this with a little bit of the brown. Just going to add a little bit of the brown because I do quite like a bit of a shadow under my eye. I think it suits my eye shape and it also helps hide those little fine wrinkles. Probably taking that too far down, so I'm just going to use again the shade Intoxicating, that first one I used to set my base, just to sort of lighten that slightly. It's a nice brightening matte shade. All right, I just touched my brush into Intimate. It is, tap your brush off, it picks up a lot. Picks up a lot, and it is pigmented. I didn't mean to put so much on. I didn't think it was going to be that pigmented, but it is. They're not mucking around. All right, that's a gorgeous purple. Oh my God, my meeting's going to be very interesting in 10 minutes time. This is a gorgeous purple. It's super vibrant. I'm getting like Jessica Rabbit sort of vibes. All right, this is a very twinkly shade. So let's see how, oh, I love it. I love a twinkly shade. So with a brush, this looks a little bit more twinkly. In my swatch, it looked a lot more metallic. Let's just see how it layers over the matte. Oh, it's stunning. I'm going to pick it up with my finger because it's like metallic on the finger, but really sort of fine. Oh, use this if you want a metallic sort of mirror effect that's not too frosty or silvery. It's just really like light catching and beautiful. Finger, or alternatively like a glitter glue or something. This is stunning. Oh, so it's definitely diffused some of that purple, which is probably good because it was a lot of purple. I'm just going to get a brush just to clean, just to blend. But that's what I wanted. I want to see how this applies. You can see a little bit of the hint of purple underneath. I think if you apply this shimmer over the top of a color, it's just going to take on a little bit of the hue, but that sort of mirror finish does take over. So with this one up here, it is so shiny when you apply it with your finger that it totally took away a lot of that purple, which is crazy because that purple was intense. I think moral to the story is if you want an intense color, put the matte over the top because this does block it out. It's very pretty though. Just going to finish it off with a little bit of that pink that I started with just to sort of tone it down a little bit. Just going to take the shade Romantic, which is that iridescent. Wow. This does add this fiery orange, which I was not expecting. but I quite like the orange and the pink vibe together. Whoa. So this sort of iridescent white one, it definitely adds this sort of, I think they call it a hot orange sort of reflection, which I dig, and I sort of want it to, I'm sort of putting it everywhere. Let's work it in. So I love that this is definitely more of that romantic soft effect, but you can play. You can definitely play with it. Bugger it. Now that we're getting into the oranges, I'm going to go in with Devotion because I really want to. Because I love that sort of vibrant corally matte. Oh, with the contrast to the purple. You have me. You have me. I really like this combo. Purples, oranges, shimmeries. Shimmeries, that's a word. All right, just a little bit more of romance just to add some fiery shimmer on top of that matte. I love this look. Okay, I was going to put some eyeliner on, but I've decided instead to go in with that very pigmented purple on an angle brush and use that as a liner, just as a way to insert a little bit more of that purple. It works. It, again, is a little bit of a drier formula, but it's such a pretty color, and it's just a way to sort of shape the eye but also work cohesively with the colors that I already have. All right, so this is the final look. I've just put another coat of mascara on, and I really like it. I think, okay, so of course, I'm going to check back with a bunch of other looks using this palette, but I think just on first impression, what I really like about this is it's approachable. So if you are sort of new to color and texture and whatnot, this isn't a scary palette. There's things that you can sort of come back to that's quite safe and that you will be able to use on a daily basis. But there are some really beautiful textures and colors in here that create really nice combinations, really nice layering. I can imagine creating a lot of different effects by layering different shimmers over different mattes. I just like this sort of purpley and sort of corally combo. I think it's really fun. So I'm excited to keep using this, and I'll be back now for another look. Look number 2. What was that? So I wanted to play with some of the greeny tones of this palette. So I started today with shade here, Seductive. So I'm like, green, it looks like orangey. So this is a shade I use, but you can see it's got like a green base to it. So I put that all over my lid, but you can definitely see how it's got that orange iridescence to it. So even though it is like a green based shimmer, in different lights, it catches in a different way, which is really interesting. So I decided to build on that and use some of the more sort of grungy colors. So I used those 2 shades. I didn't delve into the darker shade today. I love this shade. This matte shade here, it's like the swampiest burnt caramel, I'm thinking gravy colored, but I love it. I just think it's such a beautiful shade, and you can see that I've used it quite a bit in my crease on my lower lash line, and I've used it to sort of blend out my brown liner a little bit. I just think it just adds a different vibe. So you have a lot of this sweet romantic, and then this just adds brings it back to grungy level, which I really dig. So I put that and this one down here on the outer corner just to sort of intensify it. This does add a slightly more green tone, obviously, to the look because it is like an olive green. This is probably the only shade that doesn't have any color shifting, intricate thing going on. It is just your standard sort of more metallic shimmer, but you know, it's got a place, it's beautiful. Everything applied really nicely. One thing I also did was when I took this on the lower lash line, I actually took this shade again and laid it over the top, and you can see how different, I'll zoom in so you can see, but you can see how different the eyeshadows look on different bases. So that shimmer just on my eyeshadow primer does have a bit of a green sort of vibe to it with a little bit of a warm shift. But once I layer that shade over the brown, it just like, it's this vibrant, shimmery orange. It's no longer greeny. All right, look number 3, and it's looking quite contrasty at the moment because the sun is very bright. But I am using the middle column. I totally by accident just used that whole column, and it makes me want to use a few of them because I feel like one good thing about the structure of this palette is that you can, of course, you've got sort of more, I would say, safe colors. You've got the special sort of, this one is just a standard shimmer, but you've got like the shimmery fun shades, and then you've got the mattes down the bottom, the more rich sort of bold mattes. But you could also use them in columns. So today I put this shade all over the lid. I put that on the lower lash line and into the crease, and then I blended it out with that shade there. So that just organically happened today, and the look looks nice and cohesive, and it looks so much nicer in the mirror than it does on camera, because when I look in the mirror I can see green, like it's like a purple base with like green reflect. It's very, very pretty. I don't know if you can get any sort of, I feel like color shifts are really hard to catch on camera, but you can definitely see how I've gone that sort of soft purple. I've got a brown liner, but it's all like this diffused soft purple, and then it's got this sort of multi-chrome sheerer shade all over the lid that does have this sort of sparkly green purple effect to it, which is very pretty. All right, so if I'm out of focus a little bit, you can probably see what I'm talking about a little bit more, that it catches a light, this green effect, which is really pretty. So for today's look, I decided to go all matte on the eye, partly because I wanted to play around with the matte formula and see how they apply in different ways, but also because I went really crazy with the highlighter and I thought, look, I've got to tone it down. I can't be shiny everywhere. So one thing I wanted to do, I was looking at this palette and I was like, okay, for my skin tone, there's only really this shade as like a crease color. This one's a bit dark. These are quite bright. So if I wanted a sort of more pared down look, this is the main one I would probably reach for. But I thought maybe I could mix this shade with a few other shades just to sort of lighten them and tweak them. I'm happy to say you totally can. So on my eyelid today, I've got this shade mixed with that shade just to tone it down and see if I can make sort of a softer caramel shade. And they mixed very nicely together. So essentially what I did was I got a fluffy brush and I just dabbed it in one, dabbed it in the other, and then sort of went back and forth just to mix it around a little bit. And I swept it on the eye and it was very, very simple. Then I did the same thing with the pink. So I dabbed that one, that one, that one, that one, and I blended it out. So there's a little bit of a pink, a soft pink just in the crease. And that was just me playing to see if I can soften the shades and if the shades work, like mix well together, which luckily they did. They worked really smoothly. There's no patchiness, there's no clashing. It worked really nicely. Then I wanted to go with that coral shade on the lower lash line because I love it. I think this shade is so much fun. And I put that on just softly with no primer. So this is just on my bare skin. And you can see that when it's just applied quite softly, it just gives a nice little coral haze to the eye. So it's not too intense. I like that. And then I use the red as a wing. So again, this is not applied in any crazy fashion. I just used a liner brush and I just picked up the product and put it on. I did build it up slightly, but there was no fancy application. There was no wetting of the brush. There was no sticky base. There was nothing. So everything, the mattes tend to apply really nicely. And even though the look is a little bit disjointed and a bit weird, it was purely for experimental purposes, but I like the look. I think it worked out all right, and I'm sort of confident now that you can definitely tone down some of these shades if they were a little bit too dark or bright for you, and your daily sort of looks. You can definitely mix it with these 3 mattes to tone it down, and they do mix really well together. So that's my matte look. Another look today, and this one I decided to use columns because my theory is the columns can work as like one look. Of course you can jump around, but I wanted to test this column today. So I've got this shade all over the lid, that in the crease, and that one sort of in the outer corner, a bit like a smudgy liner effect. So Mainly it's that really warm sort of this brown, that toffee brown, and that all over the lid. This is super pigmented. It doesn't have any twinkle in it. It doesn't have any duochrome. It doesn't have any multichrome. It's your standard shimmer, but like very bold shimmer. So you can see it's this sort of like army green, olive green, but it's quite dark. Now this look is totally fine if you like a really grungy effect. This is actually really pretty. On me, these really dark looks on a daily basis are a bit much, but now I want to take something and I want to layer it. So I'm wanting to layer one of the shimmery shades over the top to see how we can sort of transform this look. So again, you can see how grungy you can go with this look, but I'm actually thinking of taking the shade Charming, which is this one here. It sort of shifts like green, yellow, orange. Interesting. I want to just tap it on and see if I can brighten the look a little bit more and just see how it layers over the top of different colors. All of a sudden that's just added a little bit more life to the look, a little bit more interest. That's a little bit brighter and something that I can sort of wear on a daily basis a little bit more. Try this one as well. So just a simple layering. I've got a light on up there, so that's what that is reflecting. So if you don't like the sort of really light iridescent toppers, just layer them and you can get completely different effects, and I think it's very pretty. All right, today's look is probably one of my favorites that I've created just because it seems really fresh and fun. It's definitely something I'd wear on a daily basis. It's the right amount of color that I don't feel self-conscious about it, and it just looks fun. We're in spring at the moment. It's one of those looks that you sort of see the matte straight off, but then as the more you look into it and the different lighting you're in, it actually looks pretty intricate, which I think is really cool. So the column that I used today, so I'm still sort of doing columns. I'm using this column here. I still need to use that dark purple, this multichrome, and the red, I think. So there's probably going to be a couple more looks coming, but this is what I'm using today. It's a very fresh, fun, spring-like, quite orangey look. And when you look at this palette, you don't really think of orange besides this color down here, but because these two have like an orange iridescence to them, this one has it as well. Things actually do lean a little bit more orange, like they sort of pick up orange on the eye. So what I've done is I've put that on the outer corner. I built it up a little bit. I blended it into the crease. Then I used this iridescent sort of white shade all over my lid. It is, the good thing about it is it's a shimmer, but it's very, very smooth. It's not like chunky glitter. It's very, very smooth. So it gives you this sort of like glowy orange look, but it's like translucent. So where I've got the matte underneath, it just adds another vibrant orange sort of element, but where I've just got the primer, it just adds like a soft sort of peachy glow, which I think is really pretty. And it could go with like the purples, could go with the red, could go with the browns, could go with the pink. So I think this one is a really pretty shade. I was actually just going to leave it at the top because I thought that looked really nice and just have nothing at the bottom, but I'm doing columns, so I wanted to use this one. This one has a bit of a, almost like a sea green base, but then it does have this sort of peachy shift to it. In my angle here, it looks quite like grass green. So I put that on the lower lash line, and you can see that there are a little bit of green hints to it when it's not catching the light, but when it is at catching the light, it still looks quite sort of peachy. All right, I've turned the brightness way down just so you can see the iridescence a little bit more. So you can see again that green, that sort of orangey peach color, how this has like this peach sort of really soft sort of glow to the eye. So again, it's not chunky sparkly, it's just this sort of like soft wash of peachy color, and then I've got the matte. And this is a little bit more accurate to how it actually looks in person. I'm going to see if I can move around and you can sort of see how it catches the light differently. All right, today I wanted to play with predominantly these two dark mattes because I hadn't really played with them too much. I think I used this one in my first demo, but besides that, I hadn't really used it. And I use this as a liner, but I wanted to use it as an eyeshadow. So I put this one all over the lid. I put this one in the outer corner and blended it out so that you can see that it creates, it's quite a deep color. Like it obviously is a dark color, but I sort of I don't know, in my head I just thought it was going to be more vibrant, but it is a lot more like deep sort of burgundy. And then I put the purple just on the lower lash line a little bit, and I put this shade as well, and I used a blue liner. Now I'll zoom in. What I kind of like about this is it demonstrates how the shimmers can look quite translucent and subtle just on your primer or just on your eye, but then when you do sort of start mixing them a little bit with the deeper shades, it takes on a whole different vibe. So I'm not sure if you can see, and it's not catching very much at the moment on camera, but I'm seeing this like vibrant orangey gold sort of flash on my eyes, which is really, really beautiful. But interestingly here, because I've sort of layered it and mixed it with the dark red, it almost looks like a cranberry shimmer. And down here as well, this actually looks like a shimmery purple, but in reality, hang on, I'll turn this down. In reality, that's just the two layered. So if you do miss some colorful shimmers in this palette, don't hesitate mixing them or layering them and sort of buffing them in together, because they do sort of merge nicely together and create a hybrid. So the shimmer and the matte together, it almost looks like it's a shimmer of that base color. All right, today's look, I was going to make it bolder and put some purples in there and all that kind of stuff. But firstly, I'm wearing a bright lip and I'm doing a wear test on this, so I didn't want to clash too much. But when I put this eyeshadow on my eyes, I was like, I was not expecting that. If I was to show you this palette and ask you what eyeshadow did I put all over my eyes, I'm wearing one eyeshadow on the lower lash line, on the top lid, and then just blend it out with a clean brush. Like, point to the one you think I'm wearing. Is it this one? Because this is what I'm wearing. This, I was putting off this shadow because I thought it was going to be so bold. Like when I swatch it, it's like this vibrant sort of purple color. But in reality, it's like this soft sort of sea foam green, gray, with this sort of iridescent purple shift to it. It's crazy. I know you can sort of see it. I just thought that what you see straight on is what's going to be translated to the lid, but it really isn't. So this is what I'm wearing all over my lid. Look at that. There you go. There's that sort of greeny sort of shift to it, but I just was not expecting it to look like this. What I like about this though, is not only does this give this beautiful sort of intricate, cool toned effect on the eyes, but it's like a one and done eyeshadow. So on the lower lash line where it's sort of blended out, in the crease where it's blended out, it picks up more sort of pinky purple, but where it's built up, it just has this really interesting sort of gray, blue, green sort of stormy color, which is really interesting. I've just turned the brightness down a little bit so you can see it a little bit better, but as you sort of turn and move, you can see that it's picking up sort of different colors. When you're out of the light, it looks like, look at that, that's looking greeny gold almost. So it is a really interesting, just one and done eyeshadow. All right, I'm ready to conclude what I think about this new palette from Glaminatrix. It is launching this weekend, so I want this up so you can have an idea of whether or not you should pick it up. Essentially, I really dig it. I think this is definitely a palette that is made for someone like me, someone that appreciates sort of fun textures, some nice bold colors, but also on a daily basis wants something that can look really effective, that can be quite simple to apply, and that you don't need any fancy techniques or any foiling or any special bases or anything like that to actually create a pretty look, because I just don't have the time. So this, I would say, is sort of like a wearable makeup enthusiast palette, and I think it does definitely deliver. Glaminatrix is an Australian brand, so I feel like this is a perfect release for spring, which is what we're in now, because it does have a lot of sort of some really vibrant, impactful, punchy colors that look really fresh, and it will be fun in summer and spring. But there's a lot of sort of floral vibes here. You got some red tones, some rosy tones, some coral tones, some beautiful sort of warmer purples. They're not really blue tone purples, they're more sort of pinky purples. And then you have these sort of rich browns that can either complement the looks or be a grungy sort of element on their own. And then of course you've got this sort of, I'm going to say it's this element here because this shade is just like a metallic shimmer. These ones are very sort of, they're multi-chromes or they're sparkly textures, but they're generally quite light in texture. So they might not have much of a strong base color. They're definitely more of that sort of spring, feminine, fun, twinkly sort of vibe. So this is a little bit more approachable and more everyday than some of their other palettes that are a little bit bolder for your sort of average makeup consumer. This is also a really nice twist on a color story that we've seen time and time again. So these sort of floral tones, these sort of romantic vibe. We've seen it a lot of brands do it, but I think what makes this one stand out is definitely the different textures and the sort of multi-chrome element to it, because I don't think I've seen the two of those put together. I think it just elevates what is already a pretty popular color story into something that is multi-dimensional. And again, the one thing I really like about this palette is that you can layer different shades to get different effects. So if you don't want something that's as sort of light that I've got going on, layer it over the dark purple and see how it turns out, because it's going to look very, very different. So again, this sort of layering, mixing element works really well for people who love makeup and want to experiment, but they want things to be a sort of safer color story. There's some pops of fun colors to brighten things up, but overall it's a pretty safe and well-loved color story. In terms of quality, I think this is a really nice quality palette. I had no issues with the formulation whatsoever. The thing that I did note was, especially this shade here, it was a little bit more powdery than some of their past palettes. So I feel like they're a bit softer, which means that they blend really nicely. And I found the mattes can mix really nicely. So if you're missing a sort of lighter shade for your crease, for example, just mix it with this shade and it tones down a lot. So this is a really great mixing shade. So even if this is too light for your skin tone, just use it to like tweak. If you want to make a light red, mix it, see how it goes. I'm sure it'll look beautiful. They do mix really nicely together. So I like the formula of this. I had no issues with fallout. So even though it was a softer consistency when it comes to the mattes, I had no problem with it like having fallout issues, and I'm not very careful with my eyeshadows. The shimmers also, there was no fallout issues and no big chunks of glitter that sort of rain down your face. These are all really well behaved eyeshadows. Since their last palette, so the Sugar and Spice palette, these are now manufactured in a factory. So one thing I think is beneficial for that, compared to some of their more hand-pressed palettes, is that the shimmers are a lot more stable, because in some of their past palettes, the shimmers feel like they're almost loose and you need to like sort of press them down, otherwise they're going to sort of I don't know, break apart, come apart. These ones are a lot more sturdy, so I feel like this is just a very reliable formula. It performs really nicely, and I'm not scared that it's going to break or be really fragile. So I think everything about this is great. In terms of their color story, again, I really like it. I think it is a color story that a lot of people really enjoy. And if you are scared to use really bold multi-chromes or really bold shimmers or sparkles, I feel like this is a really approachable way to get into it, because again, these sort of rosy, mauvey, peachy shades, shades that people love, and these, even though they're fun and if you look up close, they're really intricate and they're really beautiful, you can actually wear them quite easily without any issues. I really like how this is set out as well. So I love that the top row, okay, it's half matte, half shimmer, but this is more the row that if you wanted a more subtle look, I would say, you could definitely use this row and you can use it to work every day and no one will be like, oh my God, that's a colorful eyeshadow. Like, it's a very, very safe row. Then you have all the shimmers. These are, again, these are the sort of multi-chrome ones that can stand alone or be toppers. You have that sort of rich olive shimmer that's like a metallic formula, and then you have the rich or bright mattes. So it's set out really nicely. It's quite aesthetic. It makes a lot of sense. But what I also like about them is you can actually go down the columns and create its own color story. So if you are new to colors or new to these sort of interesting formulas and you don't know how to pair colors, if you do go down a row, you can create a look in itself that complements really, really well and is more approachable. I know that I don't tend to like using more than 3 eyeshadows in a look these days. I just don't have the time. So to know that I can go down this row and it creates a really fresh, sort of peachy spring look, I'm inclined to do that a lot. So I really like how not only does it make sense horizontally, but it also makes sense in color story and how you can structure like a rosy look, a fresh peachy look, a light purpley pink look, a richer sort of purpley look, and then you've got your grungy brown. So I thought that was really smart. Another great thing about this palette is if you don't want to be, you know, structured with certain looks and you are very confident with mixing colors, all these colors will work well together. You can literally close your eyes, point to 5 shades or 2 shades or whatever it happens to be, and the shades will work well together. So there's a lot of pros about this palette. The formula, the colors, how it applies, the looks, I like it all. There's nothing that I dislike about this palette, but there are some tweaks that I would have preferred to make this a little bit more, just a little bit more. A little bit more. It's a great palette. I really enjoy it. If you like their formula or you like this color story, you're not going to be disappointed. But there are a couple of tweaks that I would have personally made. So firstly, the chocolate brown. I'm very sick of chocolate brown. So I would have swapped this dark brown for a dark green like this. Simply because I really like the combination of sort of pinks and roses and purples with green. I think it's a stunning combo. It's more of like a subtle complementary look. They just work really well together. Also, if you had this type of green and you mixed it with the red, you could actually create your own basic brown anyway. So if you really wanted a basic brown, you just use color theory and you can make it. So I would have loved to have seen that be a little bit more green, just to really bring this into more of a grungy green vibe. If you want to go brown, you can go brown. If you want to go a little bit more green, I would have loved that to be there because I just think it works well with this sort of floral vibe, because I feel like the leaves and the stems of flowers, it just works really cohesively together. So I would have loved to have seen that. Also, one thing that I want to warn people about is that even though this looks quite cool tone, you get a lot of cool tone purples, you get some nice pinks, this actually is surprisingly orange. Now, some people aren't going to like orange and they're not going to want to hear that, but this color, which is, to be honest, my favorite matte of the whole palette, it is such a stunning, vibrant, peachy coral shade. I love it. I think it's such a great shade, but I thought this was going to be the only sort of really warm shade here. But when you actually do swatch quite a few of them, so I'm thinking this one, this one, this one, they all have an orangey shift to them. So when you put them on the eyes, they turn a lot of what seems to be cool toned eyeshadows into more of a warm vibe to them. So you can see they're all catching orange, orange, orange. So they all have different base colors, obviously. And of course, if you pack them on the eye, they're going to look slightly different. But especially when you layer them over other colors, the predominant thing that comes off them is that shimmery orange effect. So what might look to be more greeny, surprisingly, this is more green. This is more orange. This is quite orange, and this is quite orange. So I like it. I think it gives this palette another dimension of like sunrise, sunset vibe. So you've got the beautiful purples and the oranges and the pinks that give that sort of sunrise effect. I think it's beautiful. But I do think that if maybe one of these shades had a different color shift, whether it's a vibrant pink or whether it's a slightly more purple, it just would have made these topper shades seem a little bit more unique from each other. Because as it is, even though the textures of these are different, this is a lot more finely milled, so it feels a lot smoother and it's not as sort of obvious sparkle. They do give a very similar reflect, which again turns this from being what looks more like a purpley pink palette to having quite noticeable orange shift to it, which you don't see when you look at the photos. So that's more of a warning that if you really, really hate orange shimmer, which I think it actually is really beautiful, but I can understand that's not going to be for everyone, it is a slightly misleading slightly misleading. So I really like this palette overall. I can see myself reaching for it a lot, especially in the spring weather. I'm going to be hitting up this shade a lot, and I loved it on the lid with this. So that's going to be a combination that I'm going to reach for a lot. But I think what sums this palette up is that it's equal parts wearable, easy to use, impactful, but also fun to play with because it's got the layering elements and different effects as you layer. It's just really fun to explore, but you end up with what could be quite vibrant looks or very, very wearable looks, but they look so stunning. Like the fact that this is one eyeshadow, I don't think people would believe me if I just said, yeah, today I'm wearing one eyeshadow. They'll be like, no, you've got different things here and here, surely. So again, this launches this weekend. So if you're in the US, I think it's Saturday night, the 7th of October. If you're in Australia, it's Sunday morning. I do have a discount code if you want 10% off. Be on the screen. All the launch details will be in the description box, including where you can buy it. They do ship internationally. And they do also have some fun single sort of sparkly eyeshadows that they've recently released as well. So check out the website if you want to. And thank you so much to Glaminatrix for sending this to me. I've had a lot of fun. So thank you to everyone for watching, and a big thank you to my channel members, and I will see you all in the next one and hopefully be chatting to you in the comment section. What do you think of this palette? Let me know. Okay, bye.